Welcome back, everyone, for another episode of the Kickstarter Weekly. This week's episode is going to be covering crowdfunding campaigns that are completing their funding between May the 23rd and May the 29th. I've got 5 different campaigns that I'm going to be covering this video, as well as 2 games that I'd like to talk to you about that I've played since the last video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, the links to the various campaigns are down below in the description section. So if anything that I'm talking about is resonating with you and you want to go look at the campaigns, possibly back them, you can just go down into the descriptions, click on the link, and it will pop you right over to the appropriate Kickstarter or Gamefound campaign. That said, let's get started with the 2 games that I've played this period. So the first of the 2 games that I played this week is Descent: Legends of the Dark. We've been continuing on in our campaign. I don't want to talk about it at too much length because I've talked about it before, and for my regular subscribers who watch all of the videos, I don't want to repeat myself too much. I will say, however, that as we've been playing it, the more we've gotten into it, my score has steadily declined. I think I started at an 8.5. A couple weeks ago, the last time that I played it, it had dipped down to a 7.5, and this week it's going to go down even lower to a 7.0. Not that much of a dip, but a little bit more. And the reason why is the more that we're playing it, the friend that I'm playing the game with, Ryan, and I, we're two-handing it, so we're each playing 2 characters for a total of 4. The more that we're playing it, the more that we're finding we don't think it's very well designed. Now, I've spoken before about how the app and the dialogue in the app is kind of bordering on the juvenile, not that well written. But we've been enjoying the actual scenarios themselves and kind of building them out as you play them when you add terrain and you explore the scenarios. We've now played, I think, our 3rd scenario where there's no real way to figure out what you're supposed to be doing in the scenario from playing the scenario. You need to kind of stumble around and figure it out. The problem there is that you have basically a gauntlet of enemies that continue to spawn. So before you can really figure out what to do, you're overwhelmed and you can't really kill off all of the monsters that have been spawning and you die. It's become a frustrating ongoing problem with Descent: Legends of the Dark. I think that if the game had been designed such that you were supposed to play scenarios and lose them and learn from them and replay them and get better at them and eventually beat them along the lines of something like the Dark Souls video game series, that would be fine. But in this game, you can't replay scenarios. You're not allowed to. It just forwards you on to the next one. It goes away in the app. There's no way to go back and replay it. I believe that with the final scenario in the game, you actually do need to beat that one to complete the scenario, and so you will need to replay that scenario until you beat it. But with these other scenarios, there's no way to replay it, which means, in our opinion, several scenarios are impossible to win unless you've kind of gone and researched the scenarios ahead of time, figured out what you're supposed to do and the most efficient way to do it, and then you might be able to win that scenario. But who wants to do that? Who wants to feel like you have to go and cheat and research a scenario before you've ever played it just to have a chance at winning? It feels really crappy. And I'm not going to be angry in this video, but it is a situation that is making both Ryan and myself angry at the game for being poorly designed. And as I said, it seems to be an ongoing problem. It's now affected us in 2 to 3 scenarios that we feel are just unwinnable unless you have researched it ahead of time. That's not fun. You don't want to go into a game like this and feel like there is no way you could possibly win a scenario unless you cheated. So that's becoming an ongoing problem. I think that based on the number of scenarios that it's been a problem with, I don't think it's going to be a problem with every scenario as we move forward. I expect it'll happen maybe twice more in the scenarios that we have left. I know that there are 14 scenarios in the campaign, along with 2 optional side quest scenarios. So that's 16 total. So we have 8 scenarios left. They run pretty long. They take between 2 to 4 hours to play. So we've been playing them 2 scenarios a day when we get together. So that means we have 4 days left to finish this campaign. I don't know that we're going to get another game day in before my wedding, which is on June 17th. So it may be several Kickstarter weeklies before I come back to it and address it again. But just know that for now, this is becoming more of a problem, and my score for the game is currently at a 7.0. I think if it continues to be a problem, my overall score for the game will probably drop down into the 6s. And I think other than that, we've been enjoying a lot of the game, which makes it even more frustrating. If it was a game that we just didn't like, we'd give up, we'd say we're done with it, I'd sell the game, and we'd move on to something else. But we're enjoying it enough that we kind of want to finish, even though the design of the game has been really annoying us at times. I do think whatever happens, I will not be buying any future expansions or games in the Descent Legends of the Dark series. I think once I launch my Twitch channel later in the year and I start playing campaign games on that Twitch channel, we may actually play some Descent 2nd Edition, which I also own. But I think that is going to become the ideal version of Descent to play. And in general, I would probably warn people away from Descent Legends of the Dark. There's just too many problems with it on the design level, in my opinion. This week I also got to play Luna Deluxified. It was a Kickstarter campaign that ran a few years ago with a deluxe version of Luna, which is a Stefan Feld game. If you went all in on it, it came with a huge playmat, lots of upgraded components, and I enjoyed the game. I didn't feel like it was as tight or required as much planning as Bonfire, which I've also played fairly recently, and I've really liked that game of Feld's. I think I've rated it a 9.0. Luna feels a little bit more open in what you can do. It just feels a little bit more loosey-goosey, and it's fun, and I enjoyed it a lot. It does, however, I think because it doesn't have the same kind of choices as Bonfire, it doesn't feel as tight a game. I didn't enjoy it as much overall. It feels to me like it's a more medium light to medium level game that I would pull out with people who enjoy games more in that spectrum. I think it's a game that will remain in my collection for a while, and I plan on teaching it to my fiance Kristen. I think she's really going to like it, but I'm really curious to teach her both Bonfire and Luna and see which one she prefers. Bonfire is definitely the heavier game. There's more information in it. It's a longer teach. There's more things that you kind of have to coordinate to score points, so it can be crunchier. Whereas Luna, it does have some tightness to it in certain areas, but it kind of feels more open overall. I didn't love Luna as much as I'd maybe hoped to. I still liked it, and I think I will be keeping it around for a while, especially since I have the Deluxified version. But I think eventually it will probably not be a Feld game that I keep in the long term, whereas Bonfire definitely will be. That's a game that I'll never be selling from my collection, barring any kind of unforeseen tragedies or things like that. A huge fan of Bonfire, and I know I'm going to be backing the new Castles of Burgundy campaign and giving away my older copy of the game, so that's another Feld game that I really like. I also have all 4 games in the Stefan Feld City collection coming, and I'm anxious to get the Merlin Big Box to the table. So I have lots of other Feld games in my collection that I'm anxious to get to. I enjoyed Luna quite a bit, but I just don't think that it has the same level of inspiration or genius that the best of the other Feld games that I've played have. It's kind of interesting and cool in its theme, but it's just not quite enough there for me. So I'm also going to rate Luna a 7.0. Descent Legends of the Dark has a 7.0. Luna has a 7.0. Descent Legends of the Dark may go down over time if it continues having more problems, and Luna may possibly bump up a little bit. I could see myself eventually scoring it 7.5, maybe an 8. Probably a 7.5 is as high as I would go on Luna, but we'll see. It's only been one play for me right now, so I like to get a few plays at least of a game under my belt before I give it a final score that I really want to stand by. But for now, 7.0 for Descent, 7.0 for Luna. I'm sure I'll be playing Luna more in a month or two, once I eventually get Kristen to play it, around all of our wedding preparations and things like that. And we'll see where I score it when I come back after more plays. So those are the 2 games that I've played this period, and that done, let's now move forward to the 5 crowdfunding campaigns that are completing their funding this week that I'd like to bring to your attention. The first of these is a game called Cytress. They had a minimum required funding goal of $11,000. They're currently at $66,000, which is about 6 times that minimum required funding goal. Cytress is going to complete its funding on Tuesday, May 24th. Cytress is a game for 1 to 5 players. It plays in about 40 to 100 minutes. The complexity on Cytress is medium heavy, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at high. Now, this is a cyberpunk themed engine building game. It's got, I don't want to call it a tree, but it looks like the Everdell tree, but it's kind of a cardboard structure that you'll build, and it will be on the table, and it'll be used much like that tree in Everdell. So there's a lot of table presence with this one. It's got worker placement, area control, and an almost RPG-like character leveling system. Now, the reason that the risk on this campaign is set at high is because even though there's a lot of cool looking things about this game, it is by a bunch of newbies. So the designer, the artist, the publisher, this is a first game for all of them, a first crowdfunding campaign as well. So the designer here is Sean Lee, the artist is Riot Bones, and the company, the publisher, is called Tress Games, after this game, Cytress. There are 3 different pledge levels with this one. For $56, you can pledge the Founder's Pledge, and that will get you the base game. If you pledge at the $94 pledge level, the narrative experience, you're going to have the following things added onto your pledge: a character pack, a mission pack, the travel pack, and the digital pack number 1. Now, the digital pack number 1 basically gives you those other 3 packs in digital form. For $150, which is the Cyberpunk experience, you're going to add in a couple more things: the Universe Pack, the Origin Storybook, and the Digital Pack 2. And again, the Digital Pack 2 is digital versions of those 2 other items. So you'll be getting the physical versions and a digital version. Now, you can also pledge at the cheaper level and then add on the specific items that you want as add-ons. As an add-on, you can get the travel pack for $5. And essentially what that is the faction boards of the game in card form. The idea here is that you could use those to make a version of the game with a smaller table footprint and hopefully use it as a travel version of the game. So instead of having big faction boards, you just have these little character cards that you'd be using instead. For $20, you can add on the character pack, and that's going to be a different little booklet for every character that's going to have some story information and things about the character in it. And then if you fold it to the middle, you can actually use that character booklet as your character faction board. And there are 5 different character booklets that come in that pack. You can add on the mission pack for $20, and that's going to be a similar kind of thing. It's going to give you 4 booklets instead of 5, and each of those booklets is filled with information and kind of backstory and some theming and color on the various missions in the game. There's 72 of them, so they'll be broken up across those 4 different booklets. For $30, you can add on the Universe Pack, and again, it's a similar thing. This time, it's 3 different booklets, and each of them is going to focus on kind of a different element of this universe, of this world. For $40, you can add on the Origin Storybook, and that's basically a novella that's set in this world, in this universe. For $30, you can add on Digital Pack number 1, and that is going to give you digital files and assets that duplicate the things that are in physical form in the character and mission booklets. For $40, you can add on Digital Pack number 2, and again, that is going to give you digital versions of the 3 universe books as well as that novella. Finally, shipping in the continental US is being estimated at $16, and Tress Games is planning on delivering Cytress in May of 2023. From there, we go to Ra, which is over on Gamefound. Now, this one had a minimum required funding goal of $30,000. They're currently at $402,000, which is 13 times that minimum required funding goal. Ra is going to complete its funding on Wednesday, May 25th. This is a game for 2 to 5 players that plays in about 45 to 60 minutes. Complexity on Ra is medium light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium low. Now, this is an auction, bidding, and set collection game. There's a few different things that you're going to be bidding on that score points in different ways, and that'll give you some of the choices that you'll be making as you're playing the game. Which things you're trying to go for to collect which set of points, and as the game goes on, which of those things are kind of more out of your reach and which are the things that you can really capitalize on. But there's a nice balance between a few different sets of assets, so it gives you choices as a player as the game goes on in terms of what you're going to be bidding on and trying to complete. It's designed by Reiner Knizia, who's also designed Modern Art, My City, The Quest for El Dorado, Samurai, and Tigris and Euphrates. And the art on this new version, this is a new version being put out by 25th Century Games, is by Ian O'Toole, who's one of my absolute favorite artists. I don't really love auction bidding games, but the fact that Ian O'Toole is doing the art almost has me backing this one. If I ever was going to get Ra and bring it into my collection, it would certainly be this Ian O'Toole version, which I think just looks head and shoulders above previous versions of the game. So Ian is best known for The Gallerist, Kanban EV, Lisboa, On Mars, and Venus Deluxe Edition. And the publisher, 25th Century Games, is best known for Kohaku, Space Explorers, and Three Sisters. Now, because this is a smaller box game, there's fewer pledges than there sometimes are with bigger campaigns. For $40, you can pledge the standard version of the game. And for $80, you can pledge the deluxe version, which is going to come with some upgraded wooden tiles and upgraded metal point tablets. The only add-on available here is a $5 metal enamel pin, a raw pin. Shipping in the continental US is being estimated at either $12 or $15, depending on whether you're pledging the standard or deluxe version of the game. And 25th Century Games is currently planning on delivering Raw in October of 2022. From there, we go back to Kickstarter for a game called Through Ice and Snow. This one had a minimum required funding goal of $11,000. They're currently sitting at $214,000, which is about 20 times that minimum required funding goal. Now, Through Ice and Snow is going to complete its funding on Thursday, May 26th. This is a game for 1 to 4 players. It plays in about 45 to 90 minutes. Complexity on Through Ice and Snow is medium heavy, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium high. Now, this is a very cool, very thematic worker placement game that finds players operating under the British Empire as they're exploring the Arctic trying to find the Northwest Passage. It's designed by Fernando Eduardo Sanchez, and it's got art by Pedro A. Alberto, who's previously worked on Cerebria the card game, Cerebria the Inside World, and Hare and Tortoise, as well as an artist named Araceli Martin. It's being published by Two Tomatoes Games, which are probably best known for the Ming Voyages, New Corp Order, and Peak Oil. Now, there are a few different pledge levels on this one. For $53, you can pledge the Explorer's Pledge. That's going to get you the base game, a Kickstarter exclusive metal helm token, which I believe is like a first player marker, a Kickstarter exclusive first player marker, and the game's stretch goals. For $80, you can pledge the Captain's Pledge, and that's going to add on the Myths and Legends expansion. The final pledge level is $105. It's the Admiral's Pledge. That's going to add on a Kickstarter exclusive metal ship that will replace the other version of the ship in the game, the Captain's Log, 5 postcards, and a subscription to a thing called Cherry, which is through the publisher. So it's a subscription through the publisher. Now, most of the things in that pledge level are also available as add-ons, not including the Cherry subscription. If you'd like to add on that Kickstarter exclusive metal ship token, it's $19 as an add-on. The 5 postcards are $11 as an add-on, and the Captain's Log is $11 as an add-on. Shipping in the continental US is being estimated at either $11 or $13. I believe the first 2 pledge levels have an estimated shipping of $11, and it's the last pledge level that has estimated shipping of $13. And then finally, Two Tomatoes Games is planning on delivering Through Ice and Snow in May of 2023. From there, we go to Tiny Epic Vikings on Kickstarter, which had a minimum required funding goal of $15,000. They're currently at $580,000, which is 39 times that minimum required funding goal. That's a very high multiplier. Tiny Epic Vikings is going to be completing its funding on Thursday, May 26th. This is a game for 1 to 4 players, plays in about 45 to 60 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium low. The Tiny Epic games are a whole franchise of games at this point. They are an attempt to get a lot of gameplay into a little box. They want it to be really cool, so they call it Tiny Epic. This one is Viking themed, and the main mechanics featured in Tiny Epic Vikings include area control, drafting, and set collection. As with all the Tiny Epic games, this one is also designed by Scott Alms. He's best known for Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, Tiny Epic Dinosaurs, Tiny Epic Galaxies, Tiny Epic Quest, and Warp's Edge. The art on this one is by Nicoletta Vassi. She's previously worked on Tiny Epic Dinosaurs, Tiny Epic Dungeons, Tiny Epic Pirates, and Tiny Epic Tactics. And the publisher, Gamelin Games, their bread and butter is these Tiny Epic games. And they're probably best known for Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, Tiny Epic Dinosaurs, Tiny Epic Galaxies, Tiny Epic Quest, and Tiny Epic Zombies. There's 3 main pledge levels for this one, particularly if you're not looking at the pledge levels that bundle multiple copies of the game together. So for $25, you can pledge base game. For $30, you can pledge the deluxe game, and that will add on the Shaman's mini expansion. And that adds in 6 more cards, 2 player mats, and 14 of these Cairn tokens. For $40, you can pledge for the deluxe bundle. That is also going to add in the Ragnarok expansion. This feels to me like it's really kind of the deluxe version of the game, the things that come with the Ragnarok expansion. You're going to get more cards, more player mats, a double-sided board, and then 21 upgraded wooden tokens. Now, depending on what you pledge, the continental US shipping is estimated at either $9 or $11. As with Through Ice and Snow, I believe the $9 shipping estimate is for the first 2 pledge levels, the standard and deluxe version of the game, because the deluxe version doesn't really add in that much more stuff. And then $11 is for the deluxe bundle that's going to add on that Ragnarok expansion, which has more weight than the Shaman's mini expansion. Finally, Gamelin Games is planning on delivering Tiny Epic Vikings in March of 2023. The final campaign of the video is Thunderstone Quest Deepwood Defenders. This had a minimum required funding goal of $50,000. They're currently at $137,000, which is about 2.5 times that minimum required funding goal. This latest Thunderstone Quest campaign is going to complete its funding on Friday, May 27th. Thunderstone Quest plays 1 to 6 players in about 60 to 150 minutes. Complexity on the series is medium heavy, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at low. Now, the Thunderstone Quest series is one of my favorite 2 deck builders out there, the other one being Aeon's End. I think they've just done a great job of creating a deck builder with a lot going on, a lot of cool stuff. And generally what you do when you're playing it is that you're going to be taking your characters into a dungeon, and you can spend light to go down, kind of far into the dungeon. You're going to be fighting creatures there. You're trying to accumulate resources, and you're building up your deck as you do this. Now, Mike Elliott has designed most of Thunderstone Quest. He's also designed most of the previous Thunderstone games. I believe Thunderstone Quest is the 3rd game in the series. There was Thunderstone originally, then once that game kind of went out of print, they brought it back with Thunderstone Advance, and then that game kind of petered off and went out of print, and then they relaunched it for a 3rd time with Thunderstone Quest. That was probably 5 years ago at this point, and they've had several follow-up campaigns since. But for the first time ever, this is no longer being designed by Mike Elliott or some of his co-collaborators. The designer on these 2 new quests is named Brett Satkowiak, and this appears to be his first published design. There are 7 different artists who've worked on these 2 quests. Guillaume Ducos has previously worked on Edge of Darkness, Oceans, and Safaka. Andre Garcia has previously worked on Edge of Darkness, Muse, and Run, Fight or Die. Monstra has previously worked on Radiant Offline Battle Arena. Victor Manuel Leza Moreno has previously worked on Dungeon Universalis, Encounters Shadowrun, and Miskatonic University, the Restricted Collection. Mirko Paganesi has previously worked on Doomtown Reloaded, Dungeon Alliance, and The Princes of Florence. Martin de Diego Saraba has previously worked on Cazadores de Fossiles, Edge of Darkness, and Mystic Veil. And finally, David Su has previously worked on Edge of Darkness, Doomtown Reloaded, and the base game of Thunderstone Quest. Finally, the publisher, Alderac Entertainment Group, is best known for Cascadia, Calico, Istanbul, Space Base, and War Chest. Now, interestingly enough, in the previous campaigns, they did big box versions of this. So the very first campaign had a huge amount of content in a huge box. They came back and they did a follow-up campaign, also in a huge box, with a barricades mode that allowed you to play Thunderstone Quest cooperatively or with a solo mode instead of just competitively. And then recently they did a third big box Kickstarter campaign. The big box in that one, though, was optional. You were able to pledge it without getting a third big box, and all of the content in that campaign didn't fill the box. Which means that for this campaign, there is no big box. The idea here is that if you've backed all of the other stuff, you have this third big box that still has room to be filled. And I think with everything that's been happening with global shipping and prices kind of going up after campaigns, it seems like AEG is taking a bit of a step back and retooling how they're doing these Thunderstone Quest campaigns. So there isn't an option here to get a big box. All you can do through this campaign is get the 2 new quests, or you can pledge for a starter kit version of the base game with the very first quest. You can also add on additional quests piecemeal, but it seems like they're now selling the quests one by one in smaller boxes, and they're no longer offering these bigger boxes. So the first pledge level in this campaign is for $50. It's called Deepwood Defenders Quests, and that's going to get you what has now become Quest 12 and 13 in the series. For a little bit less, for $50, you can pledge the starter set, and that will get you not the big box, not everything that originally came with it, but enough stuff to give you everything you need to play in the base game, and then everything that is relevant to the first quest. Now, if you'd like to add on more of the quests, everything between Quest 2 and Quest 11, you can do that as add-ons. And every quest that you add on is going to be $35. You can also add on the barricades mode, which is what allows you to play in either solo mode or cooperatively, and that as well is $35 as an add-on. Now, if you want to get the big oversized neoprene playmat, that is also available as an add-on, $20. And sleeves are available through this campaign for $15, which will get you a pack of 500. So whatever you back, however many expansions you back, you're just going to need to count up the cards and then put in that many sleeves. If you're just getting the new stuff, Quests 12 and 13, they each have around 350 cards, so you'll need to get 2 sets of 500 sleeves, which would be $30. 2 $15 add-ons to give you enough sleeves to cover everything, and then you'll still have about 300 sleeves left over. Shipping in the continental US is being estimated at either $13 or $20 for this campaign. $13 is for the 2 new quests. $20 is the estimated shipping for the starter kit, because it's still going to come with a box, a fairly big box, not as big as the original box, and it will have more things in it that are heavier that you need to play the game if you don't already have it. player boards and a main board and things that have more weight to it. So the shipping estimate for that pledge is the $20. And then I imagine if you add on a lot of quests, you'll probably have additional shipping as well. Finally, AEG is planning on delivering these new Thunderstone quests as well as the starter kit in May of 2023. So that wraps up the 5 different campaigns that I wanted to talk about today. But before I go, I still want to talk about the 2 games that I personally backed from last week's video, as well as the new acquisitions to my collection. Now, I believe in last week's video I profiled 5 different campaigns as well. I ended up backing 2 of those. The first was the Age of Steam expansions, Volume 1, 2, and 3. It was a whole bunch of additional maps for Age of Steam. I love train games. Age of Steam is my favorite train game. It's really heavy and crunchy. There's lots of really tight decisions to be made in that game. And I think it's just going to be something that will be in my collection forever. So I went ahead and I picked up all the remaining maps that I didn't already have, which was, I think, 1 of the map sets from Volume 1 and then all of Volumes 2 and 3, as well as the empty box for Volume 1. And I also backed Waste Nights Beyond the Horizon, which was one of my favorite cooperative games, the original Waste Night 2nd edition, when that one was on crowdfunding a few years ago. I think it was in 2020, maybe 2021. But I've played that game, I really like it a lot, and so for me it was a no-brainer to get the new expansion. And that's something that I hope to share with you all and play at length once I get the Twitch channel up and running later this year. And that finally brings me to the 5 new acquisitions into my collection. Now, the first of these is Concordia Salsa. I went ahead and bought the big Concordia Venus box a year or 2 ago when they released that. But the one thing that it didn't have in it was Salsa, which is kind of a wild resource. It allows you to do different things in the game. So it seemed like the right time to pick that up to be able to add into Venus. And the reason that I did that is because I was also backing Concordia Solitaria. Now, that is a new release. Salsa had existed previously. So that is a new release that allows you to play Concordia solo. I really wanted to get that. I love Concordia. I think it is a great game for players of all complexity levels and a game that players can kind of come together and play together. It's just got a lot of good decision making, enough to keep heavier gamers occupied and engaged, but it's not so complicated that lighter gamers can't play it. I think it's one of these games that's kind of in this middle space that is a great game that everyone can play. So I love it. That's why I got Venus. When Solitaria launched, I knew that was something that I was going to pick up, and so I used that moment to also grab Salsa. I also picked up Lost Ruins of Arnak Expedition Leaders. I really like Lost Ruins of Arnak. I think it's a great hybrid deck builder. So you're doing some deck building while you're playing it, but there's also a lot of stuff happening out on the board. There's worker placement, you're going to different locations, trying to beat monsters and, explore tombs and things. And there's also kind of a track that you can go up that will give you bonuses. There are a lot of good decisions to make in Lost Ruins of Arnak in general. And that's another game that I think can really appeal to a wide swath of gamers. And I'd heard really good things about the expansion. It took a little while for me to acquire it into my collection just because of all of the ongoing global shipping issues and the fact that this was just not as available as it was supposed to be originally. But it finally reached all of the shops and all of the online retailers, so I was finally able to pick it up and add it to my collection. Hopefully I'll get to play Lost Ruins of Arnak with it soon. It was one of my favorite games from the year that it came out. I think it was 2020. But my 2 favorite hybrid deck building games from that year were Lost Ruins of Arnak and Dune Imperium. And both of them, I think, have really long legs and can appeal to lots of different gamers. I also received the Port Royal Big Box. This is an Alexander Pfister game from 2014. He's one of my favorite designers. He does a lot of great games, including Maracaibo, Great Western Trail, most recently Boone Lake. And this was just a game of his that I hadn't played. I think it was actually out of print. And it's a smaller, lighter game, but there had been some additional content made for it over the years. So they brought it all together. They put it out in a new edition, a big box. I'm really anxious to get that one to the table because I'm not sure if it's going to be a keeper or not. But it could be a game, a lighter game that Kristen and I could play when we're looking for something smaller, something shorter. We have less time. And she really likes Alexander Pfister as well. So we need to get this one to the table, see what we think of it, and then see if it's something that we want to keep in our collection or not. And finally, the last addition to my collection is a game called Wild Serengeti. This one was a Kickstarter that delivered, and this is a game that I backed partly for my fiance Kristen because it has so many cool animal meeples, animals from the Serengeti, lions and tigers and all kinds of just really, really well detailed, different looking animal meeples. So much so that they even had options in that Kickstarter just to get extra meeples if you wanted to put them up on your shelves and decorate with them. And I think that's probably something that a lot of people did because the animal meeples are that cool in Wild Serengeti. They can completely stand on their own and be kind of a little tchotchke knick-knack showpiece on shelves. But essentially the gameplay for this one is players are moving around the various meeples in a square grid board, trying to get them into certain places, into different tableaus so that they can satisfy different goals. And players are essentially nature photographers. So they're trying to corral the animals together based on their goal cards that they have. And then they're essentially taking a picture of them and fulfilling that goal. I always really like games that have cameras in them. I think it's a really neat way of essentially doing a first-person shooter where you're not killing anything. I'm thinking of games like Beyond Good and Evil, or in other games like No Man's Sky, where you're using kind of a camera device to discover and record animal species. It's just a clever little mechanic that I've always liked wherever I've seen it. And more often it's been in video games. Here it's being done in a board game, and I really appreciate that they're not doing a gameplay mechanic where you're trying to hunt the animals. Instead, you're trying to take pictures of them. That's something that I think everyone can enjoy, and it's a more positive gameplay experience than if they'd had you going out into the Serengeti and shooting animals and poaching them and killing them. That would be a game that I wouldn't want to own. But this game, especially with these really cool meeples, yes, please. And I think it's a game that's really going to appeal to Kristen. So when we eventually get it to the table, it might be a little while because of our wedding that's happening soon. But when we eventually do play it and get it to the table, I definitely will report back to you and let you know what we both thought of it. I want to say that I have high expectations for it, but I'm not really expecting it to be some great game that's redesigning certain genres. I think it's just going to be a really solid game that does what it does well and does it in a way that's unique to its theme and really pays off on those animal meeples and the table presence of it. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really pretty as well. So thank you very much for watching this video and spending some time with me, seeing what I thought of certain games and, which crowdfunding campaigns I thought I might want to bring your attention to that maybe you haven't backed yet. Hopefully I was able to draw your attention to a crowdfunding campaign you weren't already aware of, and maybe I shared some thoughts about some games that were helpful to you. Let me know in the comment section what games you're currently thinking about backing, and if you come back next week, you'll find out which of the games that I profiled in this video I personally backed. I think I'm only going to be backing one of the campaigns from this week, but there is a second campaign that I profiled here today that I'm really on the fence about and wanting to back, but I think I probably won't. I do have a friend who's backing that one, so I'll still get to play it either way. But if you want to play the home game, let me know which game you think that I'm backing, and let me know which game you think I'm on the fence about, because I think that's the bigger question. Have a great week, play lots of great games, and I'll be back with another Kickstarter Weekly in less than a week's time talking about next week's crowdfunding campaigns. Until then, be excellent to each other and take care.